3 friends buried, 1 heart attack survived. A bar fight in Reno once talked down with nothing but a fake Rolex and pure nerve. That was my resume for handling trouble. Right up until the afternoon, I heard a grown woman sobbing behind a locked door in my son's attic and realized nothing on that resume had prepared me for it. Welcome back. Pour your coffee, settle in, and get ready because in these stories, karma always finds the address. Subscribe so you never miss what happens next. My name is Fred George. I'm 64 years old. I've got a bad knee, a good marriage, and until that Wednesday in July, a pretty simple life. Wake up, drink coffee with my wife Susie, complain about the news, take a nap I'll deny taking. That was the whole routine. Then my son Logan and his wife Julia went on vacation, and I decided to be a nice guy. I didn't know it yet, but nice guy was about to get me tangled up in something that had been buried for over 40 years. Something with my name stitched into it, whether I liked it or not. Logan called me the week before they left. Dad, we're heading to the coast for 10 days. Could you keep an eye on the house? Maybe water Julia's tomato plants. She'll kill me if they die. Sure, I said. You want me to feed the cat too? We don't have a cat, Dad. Well, somebody's got a cat over there. I hear meowing every time I walk past. That's the neighbor's cat, Dad. I know that, Logan. I was making a joke. He sighed the way he sighed at me since he was 14. Some things don't change. Logan's 31 now, married 2 years, works some kind of logistics job I've never fully understood, despite him explaining it to me at least 6 times. Julia is 29, sharp as a tack, and honestly the only person who can beat me at chess without gloating about it much. They'd bought the house 18 months back. Nice little 3-bedroom on Lark's Lane, the kind of place with a wraparound porch and an attic Julia kept saying she wanted to finally do something with. I remember thinking at the time that attic talk was just decorating chatter. People always say they're going to finish the attic. Nobody ever does. I should have paid more attention to how many times she brought it up and how nervous she got when I offered to help. Anyway, they left on a Sunday. By Wednesday, the house already looked like it needed a once-over. Mail piling up, a faint smell of dust, Julia's tomato plants drooping like they'd given up on life. So I did what any responsible father-in-law with too much free time does. I called a cleaning service. Sparkle and shine. This is Cynthia, the voice on the phone said, cheerful as a game show host. How can I help you today? Yeah, hi, I need someone to clean my son's house while he's out of town. Nothing crazy. Dust, vacuum, maybe wipe down the kitchen. Absolutely, sir. We can have someone there this afternoon. Would 300 work? 3's fine. I gave her the address, hung up, and felt pretty good about myself. Susie even said so. Look at you, she said, not looking up from her crossword. Father-in-law of the year, I'm aiming for husband of the decade next. I said, give me a minute, don't strain yourself. I laughed. I had no idea that laugh was the last easy one I'd have for a while. Cynthia showed up right on time. I know because I drove by around 3:15 just to make sure she'd found the place. Okay. And her little sedan was parked out front. I didn't go in. No reason to hover over a woman doing her job. I went home, had a sandwich, watched half a rerun I'd already seen twice. Normal afternoon, the kind you forget by dinner. At 4:19 my phone rang. Unknown number. This is Fred, I said. Sir, hi, this is Cynthia from the cleaning service. I was at your son's house. Something in her voice made my stomach drop before she even finished the sentence. She wasn't cheerful anymore. She was talking fast, breathless, like she'd been running. Yeah, Cynthia, what's going on? Sir, I don't know how to say this without sounding crazy, but there's someone in the attic. I heard crying. It's not the TV I checked. The TV's off. I heard someone crying up there, and I knocked and nobody answered, and I didn't know what to do. I'm sitting in my car right now. I didn't want to just leave without telling somebody. Wait, slow down. You're saying somebody's in the attic. Like an animal, a raccoon. Sir, raccoons don't cry like a person crying. I know what I heard. I want to tell you I stayed calm. I didn't. My chest went tight. That specific tight feeling I hadn't had since my heart attack 4 years back. And for one ugly second I thought, not again, not now. But it passed. Because fear does that. It burns hot and then it turns into something colder and more useful. Anger purpose. Don't go back in. I told her, I'm 5 minutes away. Stay in your car, should I call the police? That question sat in the air a beat too long. No, I said not yet. Let me look first. I don't know why I said that. Maybe some old instinct. Some part of me that didn't want strangers with badges walking through my son's house before I understood what I was walking into. Maybe I just wanted to be the one who found the answer. Whatever the reason, it was the decision that started everything. I grabbed my keys and left Susie a note that just said, "Be back soon, Logan's house." Because if I told her what I actually heard, she'd have been in the car with me. And I didn't want her walking into whatever this was. I got in my truck, my hands not exactly steady, and I drove faster than I should have. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to find out that my son had been keeping a secret bigger than any tomato plant. Cynthia was standing by her car when I pulled up, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold in 80 degrees heat. She was maybe 40, dark hair pulled back. The kind of practical woman who probably didn't scare easy, and she looked plenty scared. "Sir, I swear I'm not making this up," she said before I even got out of the truck. "I believe you," I said. And I did. "Show me." We went in through the front door. The house was quiet in that specific way. Empty houses are quiet, a hum from the fridge, nothing else. We stood at the bottom of the attic stairs, and for a second, neither of us moved. Then I heard it, a sound like someone trying very hard not to be heard. Muffled, broken, a person crying with their hand over their own mouth. My blood went hot. "Stay here," I told Cynthia, and I went up. The attic door was shut, but not locked from the outside. There was, I noticed, with a chill, a simple slide bolt on the outside of the door. Someone had installed that. Someone had put a lock on this door that only worked from the hallway side. I slid it open. My hand was shaking, and I am not ashamed to admit that. "Hello," I said. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm Logan's dad." Silence, then a whisper. "Please don't call anyone." I pushed the door open. The attic had been fixed up, not fully finished, but livable. A mattress in the corner, a lamp, a little stack of books, a cooler that turned out to be full of bottled water and granola bars, and sitting against the far wall, knees pulled to her chest, was a young woman, maybe 25, blonde hair and a messy braid, eyes red and swollen, wearing one of Julia's old college sweatshirts. She looked at me like I was about to be the worst thing that ever happened to her. "Please," she said again, "please clear's throat, don't call the police." "I'm not. This isn't what it looks like." "It looks like my son locked a woman in his attic," I said, and my voice came out harder than I meant it to. "So, you're going to have to help me understand what it actually is." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, and when she spoke again, her voice was steadier than I expected. "My name is Ellen," she said, "and nobody locked me in here. I lock it from the inside, too. There's a bolt in here, see?" She pointed to a second bolt mounted inside the little room. "I do it myself. Both sides, so nobody can get to me either way." "Get to you from what?" She looked at the floor for a long moment. "From someone who's been looking for me for 6 months," she said. "Someone your son and daughter-in-law have been keeping me safe from. And sir, I really think you should sit down before I tell you the rest because it's going to have your name in it, too." I did not sit down. I don't sit down when someone tells me to sit down. That's a rule I've had since I was a young man, and it served me fine. "My name," I said. "I don't know you. I've never seen you in my life." "No," Ellen said, "but you knew my father." "I want to be honest with you about something. There's a version of this story where I storm out, call the police, let the professionals sort it out, and go home to finish my sandwich. That would have been the smart version. I didn't do the smart version. I sat down on an overturned crate because apparently my own rules don't survive contact with a crying stranger, and I said, "Start from the beginning, all of it." Ellen took a shaky breath. 42 years ago, she said there was a fire at a warehouse on the east side of town. Canary Row, they used to call that stretch. You remember it, I did. Everybody my age in this town remembered the Canary Row fire. 3 men died. It made the papers for a month. That warehouse, Ellen continued, wasn't just storage. It was a front. Money laundering. Some other things I don't fully understand even now. My father worked there. He wasn't one of the men who died. He was the one who got out. And 2 weeks later, he testified against the man who ran the whole operation. Cyril Hogan, I said before I even meant to say it. Ellen's eyes went wide. You know that name. I knew that name the way you know a scar. Cyril Hogan had been decades ago a man everybody in this town either feared or pretended not to know. Before the fire, before any of it. I'd worked 2 summers doing bookkeeping for one of his shell companies. A nothing job, filing papers, 22 years old and dumb as a fence post about who I was really working for. I quit 6 months before the fire because something about the place made my skin crawl. And I never looked back, never told anyone but Susie, and figured that chapter of my life was closed for good. He went to prison, I said slowly. 15 years if I remember right. Almost 27 years ago now, Ellen said, and the first thing he did when he got out was start looking for the man who put him there. Your father testified. That was public record. Why is he still hunting people down? Because my father didn't just testify about the fire. Ellen said he testified about where the money went. Millions, sir. Money that Cyril Hogan never got back. Money that's apparently still sitting somewhere with my father's name on the only paper trail that leads to it. Cyril spent every year since his release trying to find my father to get that trail back. My father died 2 years ago. Heart attack. Nothing suspicious, just bad luck. But Cyril doesn't know that. Or he does know it and thinks I'm the next best thing. Either way, I've had people watching my apartment. I've had my car followed. 4 months ago, someone broke into my place and went through every drawer I own like they were looking for a piece of paper. My chest was doing that tight thing again. And Logan and Julia, how do they fit into this? For the first time, Ellen almost smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Julia is my cousin, she said. We grew up together before her family moved. She's the only person I trust left. When things got bad, I called her. She and Logan didn't even hesitate. They built this room in 3 days. They've been buying me groceries under fake names, paying for a burner phone, doing everything they can to keep me invisible while I figure out what to do next. I sat there in that attic and felt something crack open in my chest. Pride and fear and fury all tangled together like wires I couldn't separate. Why didn't they tell me? I said. I'm his father. I could have helped. Ellen looked at me steadily because Logan said if his dad found out, his dad would want to fix it himself, she said. And he was scared that you fixing it yourself was exactly how somebody was going to end up dead. I didn't know it yet, but Logan was righter than either of us wanted to admit. I didn't call the police. Not that day. I told Cynthia I'd cover a full week's pay for her trouble and asked her as plainly as I could to forget what she saw. She looked at me for a long moment, a woman clearly deciding whether I was a good man or a dangerous one, and finally said, I've got kids to feed, sir. I don't need trouble finding me either. Your secret's safe, she left, and to this day I don't know if I did right by her, but she never called back, never talked. And I've sent her a check every month since out of something between gratitude and guilt. I sat with Ellen a while longer, brought her real food from the kitchen instead of granola bars. Told her, God help me that I'd help however I could. Then I went home and didn't say a single word to Susie, which if you've been married as long as I have, you know, is nearly impossible. Susie can read a lie off my face from across a parking lot. You're doing the thing, she said that night at dinner. What thing? The thing where your jaw gets tight and you stare at your plate like it insulted your mother. What happened at Logan's? I looked at my wife of 36 years and made a decision that looking back might have been the only unambiguously right one I made in that whole mess. I need you to sit down, I said. And I need you to not call our son screaming the second I'm done talking. Fred George, I have never screamed at our son in my life. You screamed at him about the Camaro. That was justified. I'm just saying manage your expectations. I told her everything, all of it. Cynthia's call. The attic, Ellen, Cyril Hogan, the fire, my own 6 months. Nobody knew about bookkeeping job from 4 decades back. Susie sat there with her fork frozen halfway to her mouth for most of it. And when I finished, she set the fork down very carefully, the way people do right before they say something serious. You worked for that man, before we were even married. It was nothing, Susie. I filed papers for 6 months and quit. You never told me his name. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think I'd ever hear it again. She was quiet a long moment. Then when do Logan and Julia get back? Saturday? Then we're not doing anything until Saturday except keeping that girl fed and safe. And Fred, she pointed the fork at me now, back in her hand. Business as usual. You are not going to go play detective. You're 64. You have a bad knee and a heart the doctors already yelled at you about twice. I wasn't going to play detective. You were already planning to drive by the old Canary Roll lot tomorrow morning, weren't you? I did not answer that because she was right. And 36 years of marriage means she already knew she was right. And saying so out loud would have just been showing off. Logan and Julia got back Saturday afternoon. Tan and relaxed in the particular way people are before they realize their vacation glow is about to be permanently ruined. I was sitting on their front porch when they pulled in, arms crossed, doing my best impression of a man who was not furious and terrified in roughly equal measure. Julia saw my face first and went pale. Dad, Logan started. Don't dad me, I said, standing up. I know about Ellen. The color drained clean out of both their faces. Julia's hand flew to her mouth. Logan just stood there in the driveway, keys still in his hand, looking like a man who'd been waiting 2 years for a phone call telling him a bomb had gone off and it had finally come. How? He started. I hired a cleaner, I said. She heard crying in the attic. I went to check. Found a young woman locked in a room you two built, hiding from a man I used to work for 30 years before you were even born. So no, Logan, I am not going to calm down. And yes, I am going to need you to start talking right now. We went inside. Julia went straight up to check on Ellen. I heard the two of them crying together through the floorboards. While Logan and I sat at the kitchen table, the same table I'd helped him assemble from a flat-packed box 2 Christmases ago. And he told me everything Ellen had already told me, plus the part she didn't know. We didn't tell you because I was scared of exactly this. Logan said you finding out and doing something. Doing something? Logan, your wife's cousin is hiding from a criminal in your attic. Somebody should be doing something. Not you, Dad. You worked for the guy. If Cyril finds out you're involved at all, you become a target too. Susie becomes a target. We wanted this contained to us. It stopped being contained the second Cynthia called me crying about noises in your attic. Logan rubbed his face with both hands. And for a second, he looked less like my grown son and more like the exhausted kid who used to come to me after nightmares. There's more, he said. Something I haven't even told Julia the full version of. My stomach dropped for the second time in 4 days. 2 weeks ago, Logan continued. We left for vacation. Someone came to my office, said he was doing a survey about neighborhood safety, asked a bunch of odd questions, asked if I lived alone, asked how long I'd owned the house. I didn't think anything of it until I got home and found our home security camera had been unplugged from the wall, not broken. Unplugged like somebody wanted us to know they could get to it. I felt the floor tilt a little. You're saying Cyril's people already know where Ellen is. I'm saying, Logan said, I think they know where we are. Whether they've connected the dots to Ellen yet, I don't know. But Dad, we might not have as much time as we thought. I didn't know it yet, but we had exactly 4 days. I've never been a patient man, and I've never been especially good at letting other people handle things I feel responsible for. Both of those traits got me in trouble more than once over 64 years, and both were about to get me in trouble again. Sunday morning, while Susie thought I was at the hardware store, I drove out to the old Canary Row lot. The warehouse itself was long gone, torn down, maybe 15 years back, replaced by a gravel lot nobody ever seemed to use. I stood there a long while, an old man in work boots staring at weeds growing up through cracked asphalt, remembering a version of myself I hadn't thought about in decades. 22 years old, cocky, convinced the job with the good pay, and the vague job description was just good luck, not a warning sign. I remembered the man who'd hired me. Slick suit, easy smile, a handshake just a little too firm. Cyril Hogan hadn't looked like a criminal. He'd looked like a man who golfed on weekends and coached Little League, which as I'd later learn was almost exactly true. I called an old friend from that era, a man named Timmy Radcliffe, who'd gone on to become a detective before he retired 8 years back. We'd stayed loosely in touch, Christmas cards, the occasional fishing trip. I hadn't planned on dragging him into this, but 64-year-old instincts don't always ask permission. Timmy, it's Fred. Fred George, to what do I owe the honor? I need to ask you something, and I need you to not ask me why for a minute. There was a pause. Cops retired or not can smell trouble through a phone line. Go ahead, Cyril Hogan. What do you know about him now? Present tense. Another pause, longer this time. Fred, why in God's name are you asking me about Cyril Hogan? Timmy, he sighed. The particular sigh of a man deciding whether an old friendship is worth the risk of a headache. He's out. Has been for decades now. Word on the street, and I mean actual street. Guys I still talk to is that the last several years he's been quietly rebuilding. Not the same operation, smarter this time, and he's been looking for something. There's been at least 2 people connected to his old case who have gone missing in the last year. Officially unconnected. Unofficially. Nobody who worked that case believes in coincidences that big. My hands went cold around the phone. Missing how? Missing as in nobody's found a body, and nobody's found a person either. Fred, seriously, why are you asking? I told him, not everything. I wasn't about to put Ellen's exact location over an unsecured phone line, but enough. The fire, Ellen's father, Ellen herself, the attic, the unplugged camera, the survey man at Logan's office. When I finished, Timmy didn't say anything for a solid 10 seconds. Fred, he finally said, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You are not equipped for this. I say that with love. You're a good man who filed paperwork for a bad man 40 years ago and got out clean. That's it. That's the whole extent of your involvement. If Cyril Hogan finds out your family is protecting the one loose end connecting him back to that missing money, you are not just a witness to him. You're an obstacle. And I have watched what that man does to obstacles. So what do? You call the FBI, not the local police. Hogan's got friends in the local department, always has. You get Ellen somewhere federal witness protection can actually reach, and you get your family somewhere safe while that happens. And Fred, you do it today, not tomorrow. Today, I didn't know it yet, but today was already too late. I got back to Logan's house a little after 2, still shaking off the conversation with Timmy, already rehearsing how I'd explain the FBI plan to a room full of terrified people. I pulled up and immediately knew something was wrong. There was a gray sedan parked across the street. 2 men inside, not talking, both watching the house with the specific stillness of men who do this kind of watching professionally. I did not park in the driveway. I drove past, circled the block twice with my heart hammering, and parked 2 streets over, then walked back through the neighbor's yard like a much younger and much dumber man than I actually was. I got in through the back door. Logan was standing at the front window, peering through a gap in the curtain, jaw tight. You see them? He whispered. I see them, I said. How long have they been there? 20 minutes. Julia already moved Ellen down to the basement behind the water heater. There's a crawl space back there. She's out of sight if anyone gets in. If anyone gets in, I said. Logan, we need to call the police right now and say what? Julia hissed, coming down the stairs. 2 men are sitting in a legally parked car on a public street. They haven't done anything. Fred nodded on paper. She was right. And I hated that she was right. I looked out the window myself. One of the men was on his phone. The other was just watching the house unblinking. Patient as a man who had all the time in the world because he was being paid to have all the time in the world. I talked to Timmy Radcliffe. I said, retired detective old friend. He says we call the FBI today. Get Ellen into actual protection instead of a converted attic. With what evidence? Logan said. Ellen's scared story and a couple guys in a car. Dad, people like this don't leave evidence. That's the whole point of people like this. Then we get evidence, I said. And something in my voice must have carried a different weight than usual, because both of them turned to look at me. I worked for this man once. Whether I like remembering it or not, I know how he thinks. I know he doesn't send two guys to sit in a car. Unless he's already decided he's close to something, which means he's close to something, which means we've got days, maybe hours, before he decides sitting and watching isn't enough. Short sentences now. I could feel my own pulse in my ears. Julia's phone buzzed. She looked down and her face went white as paper. What? I said, what is it? She turned the screen toward me. A text from an unknown number, sent to a phone that she told me later had never given its number to a single soul outside our family. Tell your father-in-law we say hello. He used to keep good books. The room went very quiet. They knew. Cyril's people knew exactly who I was. I want to tell you I had a brilliant plan at that moment. I didn't. What I had was rage, clean, focused. The specific kind of anger that comes from watching men threaten your family from a car parked across the street, like it's the most casual thing in the world. They're trying to scare us, Logan said, though his voice shook a little on the word scare. It's working, Julia said flatly. I looked at the two of them, my son, grown and married and braver than I think even he knew. And Julia, who'd built a hiding place for her cousin in 3 days flat and never once complained about the risk. And I made a decision. Get Ellen ready to move. I said tonight, not to another hiding spot somewhere real. Timmy's got contacts. I'm calling him back right now, and I'm not hanging up until he gives me a name and a location that actually means something. FBI, U.S. Marshals, whoever handles this. And you two are coming with her all the way wherever that takes you until this is finished. What about you and Mom? Logan asked. We're going to be the distraction. I said. Julia's eyebrows shot up. The what? They're watching this house because they think Ellen's here and because they now know I'm connected. So we give them something to watch that isn't the four of you slipping out the back. Your mother and I drive my truck straight down the middle of the street. Big and slow and obvious, like we're heading somewhere important. Buys you 15-20 minutes. Dad, that's insane. Dad's had worse ideas, Julia said. Which fair? I called Susie first, laid out the plan in about 90 seconds flat. And my wife, bless her, completely didn't argue, didn't cry. Didn't ask a single unnecessary question. She just said, give me 10 minutes to grab my good coat. If we're being somebody's distraction, I'm at least doing it looking nice. And that I think is the exact moment I fell in love with her all over again after 36 years. I called Timmy back. I need a real name, I said, not a maybe, a real federal contact. Right now, tonight, there was a pause, and then Timmy retired. Out of the game for 8 years, a man who owed me nothing more than old fishing trips and Christmas cards said, give me 20 minutes. He called back in 12, gave me a name, a direct line. A field office 2 counties over that handled exactly this kind of case. Said the agent handling cases like this had been trying to build a case against Hogan's new operation for over a year and had exactly 0 solid witnesses. Tell him Ellen's father's old testimony, Timmy said. Tell him she's got documents. Does she have documents, Fred? I hadn't thought to ask. I found out 20 minutes later, standing in Logan's kitchen while Ellen, pale, shaking but steady in a way that told me exactly whose daughter she was, pulled a flash drive out of the lining of an old backpack. My father gave this to me the year before he died, she said. Told me if anything ever happened to him to guard it with my life. I never even looked at what's on it. I was too scared. We looked at that little flash drive like it was a live grenade. In a way, it was. Here's the part where I tell you that my son's family fled his house in the dead of night, while my wife and I served as bait for 2 hired men in a gray sedan. And I'd love to tell you it went off like clockwork. It did not. Susie and I left first at 7:40, headlights on, driving slow and obvious down Lark's Lane in my truck like a couple heading out to an early dinner reservation. I watched the gray sedan in my mirror. It didn't move. They're not following, I said. Give it a second, Susie said, calm as anything, hands folded in her lap like we were headed to church instead of into the jaws of something neither of us fully understood. The sedan pulled out behind us. 30 seconds later, my heart about came out of my chest, but I kept the truck steady. Kept the speed exactly at the limit, because the whole plan depended on looking like two boring old people doing something boring. I drove us toward the shopping plaza on the far side of town. Lights, cameras, people, the safest kind of crowded. And behind us, the gray sedan kept a careful 2-car distance the entire way. They were good, professional, never too close, never far enough to lose us. I called Logan on the truck's hands-free the second we hit the plaza parking lot, voice tight and low. We're clear. They're on us. Go now. Copy, he said. And the word landed strange coming from my son like he'd rehearsed it in a movie in his head at some point in his life and never expected to actually use it. Julia's driving. Ellen's on the floor in the back under a blanket. We're taking the county road, avoiding the highway cameras like Timmy said. Go, I said again and hung up. Susie and I sat in that parking lot for 11 of the longest minutes of my life. Engine idling. The gray sedan parked 4 rows back like a patient predator that hadn't yet decided we weren't worth eating. I watched a father walk his kids into an ice cream shop. I watched teenagers loiter by a fountain. Ordinary evening, ordinary people. And somewhere out on the county road, my son was driving his wife's terrified cousin toward a stranger. A federal agent who might be the only thing standing between our family and whatever Hogan had planned. My phone buzzed. Logan, we made it, he said, breathless. The agent met us at the rest stop like Timmy said. He's Dad. He's taking this seriously, really seriously. He recognized my father-in-law's name the second Ellen said it. Relief hit me so hard I had to grip the steering wheel and the flash drive. The agent's got a laptop in his car. He's looking at it right now. There was a long pause on the line, long enough that I said, Logan, you there, Dad? Logan said, and his voice had gone strange, flat. The voice of a man staring at something he didn't expect. There's more on this drive than just financial records. There's a name. Whose name? Cyril Hogan, obviously, but there's another one too. Someone still active in the operation. Someone local. Dad, it's a cop. A name he says is on the local force right now. Today I felt something cold settle into my stomach. Timmy said Hogan has friends on the local force. I said slowly. He said don't go to them. Yeah, Logan said. Turns out he was right to be specific about that. We didn't know it yet. Sitting in that parking lot watching an ice cream shop, half relieved and half terrified. But the men in the gray sedan hadn't been watching Logan's house by accident. They'd been waiting for confirmation. And the second Logan and Julia's car left that driveway with Ellen inside it, somebody had made a phone call. Susie noticed it first. Fred, she said. Lo, that car's moving. The gray sedan pulled out of its spot slow and unhurried, and instead of coming toward us, it turned the opposite direction toward Lark's Lane toward the empty house. They know, I said. They know Ellen's gone. They're checking the house, which means they'll figure out which direction to look next, Susie said. And for the first time that night, I heard real fear crack through her calm. I called Logan back immediately. They're pulling off us, heading back toward your place. You need to move faster. Tell the agent everything's accelerated. We're already at the field office, Logan said. The agent's got Ellen in an actual interview room. Dad, secure building, real security. We're safe here for now, I said. But Logan, that dirty cop, if Hogan's got someone inside the department and that someone finds out where you are, the agent thought of that already. Logan said he's keeping this off local radio entirely. Federal case, federal building, no local involvement. He says if there's a leak in the department, this is the only way to keep it from reaching Hogan in time. I wanted to believe that was enough. I really did. It wasn't because 2 hours later, while Susie and I were finally driving home, exhausted, wrung out, thinking the worst of it might actually be over, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered it out of habit before some older, wiser instinct could stop me. Fred George, said a voice I hadn't heard in over 30 years. Smooth as oil, unbothered as a man discussing the weather. It's been a long time. You always were good with numbers. Shame you never learned when to stop counting. My hands went ice cold on the wheel. Cyril Hogan, I don't know what you think you want from me, I said, forcing my voice steady. But you've got the wrong man. I filed papers for you 40 years ago and quit. That's the whole extent of it. See, that's the thing, Fred, Cyril said, and I could hear the smile in it. That same too friendly voice I remembered from a warehouse office decades back. I don't actually want anything from you. I wanted something from your son's little house guest. But she's tucked away nice and safe in a federal building now, isn't she? Very smart, very fast. Somebody in your family's got good instincts. Then we're done here, I said almost. Cyril said, see, here's the part where I remind you that safety is a funny thing, Fred. It only covers the people who are inside the building. Your son and his pretty wife had to drive home eventually. And your house, the one you and your lovely wife have lived in for what, 30 years now, that's not inside any federal building either. The line went dead. I didn't know it yet, but Cyril Hogan had just made the single worst mistake of his entire miserable life. He'd threatened my family. I want to be honest with you about something because I've been honest with you this whole story, and I'm not going to stop now at the part that makes me look less than reasonable. When Cyril Hogan threatened my wife, my son, and my daughter-in-law over a phone line, something in me that had been simmering my whole adult life, every slight, every fear. Every helpless moment watching bad men get away with things because good men were too scared or too tired to stop them came to a full rolling boil. I did not call the agent first. I called Timmy. He called me directly. I told him, hands still shaking on the wheel while Susie gripped my arm, white-faced, listening to every word. Threatened Susie, threatened Logan and Julia. Timmy, I need to know everything about this man right now. Where he lives, where he actually operates from, everything you've got. Fred, slow down. I am done slowing down, I said, and my voice came out in a register I hadn't used in years, low and hard. That man spent decades hunting a dead man and his daughter over money he lost fair and square for being a criminal. He just threatened my grandchildren before they're even born. I am not calling the police to file a report and wait my turn. Give me what you have. There was a long silence. You call the agent the second I give you anything. Timmy finally said, you do not go near this man yourself, Fred. I mean it. You're a father protecting his family. I understand that better than almost anybody. But going near Cyril Hogan yourself gets you killed and gets him off on a technicality when his lawyers argue entrapment or harassment. You let the feds do this, right? Fine, I said. Give me what you've got and I'll give it straight to the agent. But Timmy, I want to be there when they take him down. I want to look that man in the eye when it happens. I didn't know it yet, but I'd get exactly that, and it would be worth every single gray hair it cost me. The next 3 days moved like a fever dream. All urgency and coffee and hushed phone calls at strange hours. The agent, it turned out, was exactly the kind of methodical, unshowy professional you'd want on your side in a situation like this. Mid-40s quiet voice, the sort of man who wrote everything down and never repeated a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. He moved Ellen, Logan, and Julia to a secure federal safe house 2 hours outside the city. He put Susie and me under a discreet protective watch of our own. A young field agent who spent 3 days parked unobtrusively down our street in an unmarked car. So ordinary-looking that Susie started bringing her coffee every morning like she was a mail carrier. The flash drive, it turned out, was a gold mine. Ellen's father hadn't just kept financial records, he'd kept correspondence. Shell company structures, a paper trail leading straight from the Canary Row fire to a modern-day operation Cyril Hogan had spent 6 years quietly rebuilding under different names, different fronts. Same rotten core. And buried in those files was the connection Logan had mentioned. A detective on the local force, who'd apparently been feeding Hogan information for years in exchange for a cut nobody in the department had ever caught. The agent arrested the dirty detective first, quietly before word could travel back to Hogan. That was the move that mattered most, Timmy told me later. Cut off the inside man before he can warn the target. Then came the harder part, proving cleanly and legally that Cyril Hogan himself had made that phone call to me. Threats over an untraceable burner phone don't exactly leave fingerprints. But Hogan, for all his careful decades of staying one step removed from his own dirty work, had made one arrogant mistake. He'd called from a phone that pinged off a tower 2 blocks from his own house. Overconfidence, the agent told me the day he laid it all out for Susie and me in a quiet conference room that smelled like burnt coffee. Guys like Hogan go 20 years without getting caught and start believing they're smarter than the systems built to catch them. He wasn't even careful about it. He wanted you scared, Mr. George. He wanted you to know exactly who was calling. Well, I said, mission accomplished on that front. We've got enough now between the flash drive, the detective's cooperation. He's talking plenty now that he's facing his own charges, and the threatening call to bring this before a grand jury within the week. Racketeering, obstruction, witness intimidation, conspiracy tied back to the original fire. This isn't a slap on the wrist, Mr. George. This is the rest of his life. I sat with that for a long moment. Decades this man had gotten away with ruining lives. Ellen's father dying with fear as his last companion. Ellen herself hiding in an attic like an animal. My own son and daughter-in-law risking everything to keep a scared young woman safe. I want to be there, I said again. When you arrest him. The agent studied me for a long moment. The way a careful man studies a request he's inclined to refuse. That's not standard procedure, Mr. George. Neither was threatening a 64-year-old man's family over the phone, I said. I'm not asking to hold the handcuffs. I just want him to see my face when it happens. I think I've earned that much. The agent was quiet a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. Stay in the car, he said. Stay behind the line. But yes, Mr. George, I think you've earned that much. They took Cyril Hogan on a warm evening 11 days after Cynthia first called me about crying in the attic. I sat in the back of an unmarked federal vehicle, 2 houses down from the address Timmy's old contacts had confirmed, watching through the windshield as 6 agents in tactical gear moved up the front walk of a house far too nice for a man who'd spent 15 years in prison and supposedly rebuilt his life on nothing but a clean record and hard work. Susie sat beside me, gripping my hands so tight I lost feeling in 2 fingers. The door opened before they even knocked. Hogan stood there in a bathrobe, silver-haired now, older than I remembered, but with that same too smooth, unbothered expression right up until he saw the badges and the guns. And understood exactly what was happening. I watched his face change. I watched decades of careful, patient cruelty collapse into something small and startled, and finally afraid. They put him in cuffs on his own front porch, under his own porch light, in front of his own quiet suburban street. The agent walked him past our car on the way to the transport vehicle. I don't know if that was intentional or just geography, but either way, Cyril Hogan's eyes landed on mine through the windshield, and for one long second, neither of us looked away. I rolled the window down. The agent didn't stop me. You always were good with numbers, Cyril, I said, echoing his own words back at him, low and steady. Guess you never learned to count the years you've got left. Something flickered behind his eyes, recognition. And underneath it, real fear, the kind he'd spent his whole life making other people feel and never once expected to feel himself. He didn't say anything. There was nothing left for him to say. They put him in the vehicle and drove him away, and I sat there in the back of that car with my wife's hand still crushing mine, and I did not feel triumphant. Exactly. I felt something quieter and harder than that. I felt done. The grand jury indicted Cyril Hogan 6 weeks later on 11 counts, including racketeering, conspiracy, and witness intimidation. That last charge, carrying my own sworn statement about the phone call, entered clean and simple into the federal record. The dirty detective pled out in exchange for testimony, which shortened his own sentence considerably, but ended his career, and from what Timmy told me, his marriage along with it. I can't say I lost sleep over that. Ellen testified before the grand jury too. Steady and clear in a way that made me prouder of her than I had any real right to be given. I'd known her less than 2 months. She since moved to a new city under a new name, started over with the kind of quiet, careful hope that people who have spent years hiding learn to hold very gently. She and Julia still talk every week. She sent me a card last month that just said, "Thank you for believing a stranger crying in an attic. Some people wouldn't have." I keep that card in my truck's glove box. Logan and Julia moved back into their house once the agent confirmed the operation was fully dismantled. No loose ends, no remaining threats. The whole rotten structure finally torn out by the roots. Julia finished the attic properly this time. No lock on the outside of the door. Just a nursery half painted because, as it turns out, they've got some good news of their own on the way. Susie still brings coffee out to whichever young agent happens to be idling on our street these days. Though thankfully, we haven't needed that kind of watching in months now. She likes to tell people at dinner parties about the time her husband hired a cleaning lady and accidentally took down a criminal empire. She tells it better than I do. She always adds the part about my jaw going tight at the dinner table, the part where she knew something was wrong before I even said a word. As for me, I think about that phone call a lot. He used to keep good books. Cyril Hogan thought that old buried connection made me small, made me reachable, made me something he could use to scare a family into silence. He was wrong about that. Same as he was wrong about almost everything else. It didn't make me small. It made me furious, and it made me useful. And in the end, it made me exactly the last thing he ever wanted, standing behind a windshield, watching him get walked to a car in handcuffs on his own front porch. Some men spend their whole lives building empires on other people's fear. I've come to believe there's a particular kind of justice in watching that fear finally turn around and walk right back up their own driveway. I don't forgive him. I want to be clear about that because people sometimes expect a story like this to end with some soft note about closure, about letting go, about moving on with a clean heart. I'm not interested in a clean heart where Cyril Hogan's concerned. He spent decades hunting a dead man and his daughter for money he'd already lost fair and square as a criminal. He threatened my wife. He threatened my son and the family Logan and Julia are about to bring into this world. Some things don't get forgiven. Some things just get finished. Cyril Hogan is sitting in a federal facility now, awaiting a trial his own lawyers have quietly admitted he's not going to win. Looking at what the agent estimates will be the rest of his natural life behind bars. Good. That's not bitterness talking. That's just a father telling you the truth. Some doors deserve to stay locked, and I intend to sleep just fine knowing exactly who's on the wrong side of that one for good. I hadn't planned on going back into a courtroom after the arrest. I figured my part was done. Statement given, window rolled down, last word said. But the agent called me 2 months later and asked if I'd be willing to testify about the phone call myself in person in front of a jury instead of just on paper. You don't have to, he said. We've got the tower data. We've got the detective's testimony. We've got Ellen's father's records. Your testimony would help, but it's not the case, Mr. George. I'll do it. I said before he even finished the sentence. Susie came with me every day of that trial. So did Logan when he could get away from work, sitting with one hand resting protectively over Julia's growing belly like he was standing guard over the whole next generation of our family. Ellen flew in for 2 days under federal escort, testified with a steadiness that made the whole courtroom go quiet, and left again before anyone outside the case even knew her real name. When it was my turn, I sat in that witness box and told 12 strangers about a phone call from a man I hadn't spoken to in over 30 years. I told them about his voice, smooth as oil, unbothered as a man discussing the weather, right up until the moment he mentioned my wife and my son by implication instead of by name. The specific cowardly way men like that threaten people, always leaving themselves just enough room to claim later they never said any such thing. Hogan's lawyer tried to rattle me on cross-examination, asked whether I could really be certain after so many years that the voice on the phone belonged to his client at all. Asked whether an old man's memory of a voice from 4 decades back could really be trusted in a courtroom. Son, I said, I've spent 64 years listening to people talk. I know the difference between a man who's nervous and a man who thinks he's untouchable. Your client's the second kind. I'd know that voice in my sleep, and frankly, some nights that week I did. A few jurors smiled at that. Hogan's lawyer did not. The trial lasted 9 days. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before coming back with guilty verdicts on all 11 counts. I watched Cyril Hogan's face when the foreman read them out one by one. Racketeering guilty, conspiracy guilty, witness intimidation guilty. And this time, there was no smooth, unbothered mask left to hide behind, just an old man in a cheap suit. Finally understanding that the world he'd spent his whole life rigging in his own favor had in the end worked exactly the way it was supposed to, he got life without the possibility of parole. Plus another 40 years tacked on for good measure, which the judge noted dryly the defendant is unlikely to need, but the court felt compelled to include regardless. I laughed out loud at that. I wasn't the only one. Susie and I drove home from the courthouse that last day with the windows down, warm air pushing through the cab, neither of us saying much for the first 20 minutes. Some quiet you don't want to interrupt. You did good, Fred. She finally said, Cynthia would be proud of you. You know, our cleaning lady, I think about her sometimes, I said. Whole thing started because she trusted her own ears instead of talking herself out of what she heard. A sign of something that Susie said. A sign of what? I don't know. Maybe that the whole mess started with one ordinary woman refusing to pretend she hadn't heard what she heard. Feels like it means something. I just haven't figured out what. Susie reached over and took my hand the same way she had in the back of that unmarked car outside Hogan's house, except this time her grip was easy, instead of desperate. The grip of a woman who finally believed the worst part was actually behind us. It means, she said, that you're the kind of man who answers the phone when a stranger's scared, even when it costs you something, even when it would have been a whole lot easier not to. I thought about that the rest of the drive home, past Lark's Lane, past the house where an attic had once hidden a terrified young woman and now held a half-painted nursery instead. Past the shopping plaza where Susie and I had once idled in a parking lot, serving as bait for men who meant us harm. I thought about Ellen's father, dead 2 years before any of this started, who'd done the very same thing 30 years before I ever had a reason to. Answered a phone, told the truth, and paid dearly for it. I thought about how his daughter had spent months hiding in an attic for the crime of being his blood, and how in the end, it was that same stubborn, inherited honesty that finally brought the whole rotten thing down for good. Some men build empires on other people's silence. I've come to believe the only real defense against a man like that isn't force, and it isn't cleverness. It's just refusing, however scared you are, to stay quiet when a stranger is crying behind a locked door. I answered the phone that day because a frightened cleaning lady needed somebody to believe her. I'd do it again tomorrow, knowing everything I know now, without a second's hesitation. Cyril Hogan is going to die in a federal prison, and the world